I've been experimenting with making hand-cut dovetail joints. The important thing with hand-cut dovetail joints is to use a geometry, especially for the pins, that is way too narrow than something that could be cut with a router bit. See, these ones, there's no way a router bit would fit in there, and that way you know that was made by hand. Except I don't like all this tedious hand dovetailing work, so I've been using my pad rotor and my bandsaw. So here's the pins part of the half-blind dovetail joint, and that can mostly be cut with a router by going in here like so. Here's the pad rotor template I made, and I made that by just cutting a whole bunch of wedges like this and gluing them down on here, and I used this spacer block to make sure I got them all at a consistent interval. Although if I was going for more genuine, I'd probably want to space these slightly irregular. One thing that's really nice about Cool Leap's metal pad rotor is that there's a nice parallel adjustment for the template. But I made these two opposing wedges, and that way I can raise this template by a small amount and still keep it parallel. Working out the layout for this piece of walnut that I'm going to use for the pins, I've got room for 3 tails to fit into it, and I'm going to have 2 full pins and a half pin on either side. Now that means one of the tails is going to fit into the middle of the piece of wood, and so I've got my follower bearing right in the middle of one of the tails, and the router here, I've marked the center and the router bit is centered right on that, so I should be good to go. I cut all of these using a 1/2" rotor bit because it cuts a lot quicker, and next I'll finish it with a smaller rotor bit that gets deeper into the corners, and to follow that new shape I'm just swapping out my 1" follower with a 1/2" follower. So the corners in here are still a little bit round, and I'll finish that off with a chisel. So these hand-cut dovetails are not entirely fake because I still have a little bit of handwork on them. Next I need to cut the tails like these, and to do that I need to transfer the marks from this one just with a pencil like that. But I've usually ended up slipping and mispositioning it a little bit, so I'm going to jig this up with these things clamped like so, and to make sure that this edge is flush with that, I made this piece of wood, which is exactly the same thickness as what's left here, put that here, and then clamp the other piece here. I'm just using a pencil because the lines are so much easier to see. I've tried it with a marking knife and then I end up cutting in the wrong place. I just need to cut this in a way that the pencil line stays. So this box fits together like this, and next I need to cut a groove all around it for the bottom to fit into. But the catch here is if I cut a groove in here all the way to the end, then that'll show on here. On here it's no problem because this is hidden. So ideally I want the groove to be inside of the middle of one of my tails, like here, and it gets hidden by this part here, and on here it still gets hidden this way. Because if this was being made all with hand tools, you would of course cut the groove with a plow plane, and it would be very difficult to do a stop groove. I of course will use a router, so I'll just make a stop groove in here and I'll still hide the bottom groove. I was going to just slide the bottom in now, but I just realized these stop grooves actually make that impossible. So I have to try to jam this apart to get that bottom in. Oh yeah. Oh, still good. Ow! Well, I put some clamps on there to get those joints to fully close, and lots of sawdust to clean up the glue mess. So far I've got 2 coats of varnish on here, and normally between coats you sand it a little bit to smooth it, but I find it's better to go over it with a scraper because that way any sort of bumpiness on the surface gets scraped flat. So here's the box varnished now, and the joints look pretty good. There is some very small gaps. I made no attempts to fill them, but this was my first time making half-blind dovetails, so I think I could improve on that. The box is relatively clunky for a box that size compared to what I do with box joints like this little drawer or this box for puzzle pieces, because I know those are very tight and very strong for their size, whereas on here I left lots of room for the half-blind joints. So even though I cheated with my hand-cut dovetails, they were still quite a lot of work. I can only imagine how tedious it would be to carve these entirely by hand. Definitely not my thing.